Okay, so picture this. You're like walking down the street in 1912, right? Newspapers are everywhere, and the headlines are all screaming about this unsinkable ship, this
Wow.
marvel of engineering meeting this really tragic end.
The Titanic.
Yeah, the Titanic.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is the shockwaves from that event were like comparable to a world war. It's just insane how deeply this disaster really resonated with everyone back then.
It's true. It really captured the world's attention, didn't it?
For sure. And today we're going to dive deep into the world of the Titanic, but not just like the sinking itself, but
Right.
all the stuff that led up to it, the finance, the ambition, even some like Anglo-German rivalry that kind of set the stage for the whole thing.
The context is so important, isn't it?
Totally. And, if you're intrigued by this kind of history stuff that feels like it's as relevant today as it was like a century ago, you should definitely hit that subscribe button.
Definitely. This is going to be good.
I think so too. So at the heart of this whole story is like this massive figure as big as the Titanic itself,
Mhm.
John Pierpont Morgan.
Oh, yeah. Type.
Exactly. The Titan. Imagine having the power to control not just Wall Street, but like industries that literally shaped the modern world, railroads, steel chefing.
It's mind-boggling.
I know, right? And he even bought out Andrew Carnegie, the self-made steel magnate.
Oh, yeah. The Scottish immigrant who, like, built an empire in America.
Yeah, exactly. That was J.P. Morgan for you.
And that acquisition wasn't just like a business deal or something. It
Yeah.
was like symbolic. It showed how American capitalism was getting more and more consolidated with people like Morgan having just immense influence.
Oh, for sure. And it kind of makes you think like how much power is too much power,
Yeah,
especially when it's in the hands of just one person.
right. It's a question we're still asking ourselves today.
Totally. And, Morgan wasn't content with just like land-based businesses. He wanted to rule the seas too.
Of course.
So he went and formed this huge company called the International Mercantile Marine, IMM.
I am.
Yeah. And get this, this wasn't just any company. It included the crown jewel of British shipping.
You're kidding?
Nope. The White Star Line.
Wow. Can you imagine what the British must have thought about that?
Oh, I bet they were freaking out. It's like how we worry about those huge tech companies today,
Yeah.
getting too big.
Yeah, totally. It's like history repeating itself.
Right. And the British were anxious for good reason.
Absolutely.
I mean, the White Star Line wasn't just like a company. It was like a symbol of national pride for them.
Exactly.
So to see it fall under American control, it was like a huge deal.
Totally. It really showed how global power was shifting.
For sure. And even when the British government tried to support their own shipping company,
Cunard.
yeah, Cunard,
Yeah.
it still wasn't enough to match Morgan's money.
He was just too powerful.
For sure. Now, speaking of White Star Line, they were like the ultimate in luxury travel.
Oh, yeah. They were like the apple of their day.
Totally. They were like revolutionaries. They changed how everyone thought about transatlantic voyages,
Hmm.
and they were founded by Thomas Ismay, and they really focused on making things opulent and comfortable. A total 180 from those like cramped and awful journeys people had to take in the past.
It was a whole new world.
Totally. And they were super smart. They tapped into the whole public fascination with technology and progress.
Well, yeah.
The steamship was like the symbol of being modern.
Right.
And they offered this experience that combined speed with crazy luxury.
A winning formula.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But here's where the story gets kind of wild. Thomas Ismay's son, Bruce,
Hmm.
he inherited the company,
Mm-hmm.
but he ended up selling the whole thing to guess who?
Don't tell me J.P. Morgan.
Yep, J.P. Morgan. Drum roll, please.
That's wild.
I know, right? And this wasn't just like a normal business deal. It was like a seismic shift. It showed the whole world that American capitalism was on the rise.
It's incredible when you think about it. It's like a testament to Morgan's ambition and how sharp he was with money.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But it also shows this like recurring theme in history,
What?
the transfer of power from the old empires to the new forces coming up.
Right, like a changing of the guard.
Exactly. It happens all the time, doesn't it?
It really does.
And while all this was going down, there was another player in the game,
Who's that?
Germany.
Ah.
Their shipping companies like Hamburg America and Norddeutschland,
Yeah.
they weren't just watching from the sidelines.
No way.
Nope. They were pushing the limits with these cutting-edge ships, putting pressure on White Star to like step up their game.
It's like they were in a race.
They were.
Mm-hmm.
And this competition, it wasn't just about money.
It was about national pride, too, right?
Yeah, it was about who had the best technology, who was the most dominant on the world stage.
Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like the space race, but on the ocean.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
So to stay ahead, Bruce Ismay, who is now like super rich from the Morgan deal,
Right.
he teamed up with Lord Peary, the guy behind the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast.
The shipbuilders.
Yep. And they had this crazy plan to build 3 colossal ships that would totally redefine luxury travel.
Wow.
The Olympic, the Britannic, and of course the Titanic.
Those names, though.
I know they're legendary,
Right.
right? And they were meant to be more than just ships. They were like statements.
Statements of ambition.
Yeah. They were supposed to show off not just luxury, but also how amazing their engineering was.
They were like symbols of what humans could do, our
Re-
ingenuity and desire to push the limits.
Totally. It's just fascinating how those big ambitions played out,
Yeah.
both the triumphs and obviously the tragedy.
Yeah. You can't forget the tragedy.
Right. And speaking of where it all began, let's shift gears to Belfast.
Okay.
This was the city where all the magic happened, dominated by the massive Harland and Wolff shipyard, the birthplace of the Titanic.
It must have been bustling.
Oh, it was. But it was also a city that was divided.
Oh, right.
The lines between the Protestants and the Catholics were like super clear, and there was all this tension simmering under the surface that would eventually erupt into violence.
It adds another layer to the story, doesn't it?
It does. It reminds us that it wasn't just about technology and money, but also about the lives of the people who built this incredible ship.
Real people with real struggles.
Exactly. Their lives were intertwined with these larger forces at play.
It's a good reminder that history is shaped by ordinary people.
Absolutely. And at the top of Harland and Wolff was Lord Peary, a true titan of shipbuilding.
What a title.
Right. He was a self-made man who rose through the ranks and turned the company into this global powerhouse.
Impressive.
But he was also a big supporter of Irish Home Rule.
Oh, wow. That was pretty controversial, wasn't it?
Super controversial. It put him at odds with the whole Protestant establishment.
It shows how politically charged the times were.
Totally.
Yeah.
And his support for Home Rule, it really highlights that whole struggle between Irish nationalism and British rule,
Yeah, like he was caught in the middle of this huge historical battle.
He was. And imagine walking through the Harland and Wolff shipyard back then.
I bet it was something else.
Over 11,000 people worked there. It was like a mini Belfast, with all its class divisions and those simmering sectarian tensions.
Wow.
And get this, they say that the foremen wore leaded bowler hats
Leaded bowler hats.
to protect themselves from falling rivets.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
I know, right? Talk about a tough work environment.
It really makes you think about the dangers those workers faced.
Totally. It's just mind-blowing that these massive ships, these symbols of luxury and progress,
Right.
were built by the hands of these workers whose lives were so shaped by the social and political realities of their time.
It's a powerful juxtaposition.
It is. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
It's amazing to think about, these workers in those rough conditions creating something like the Titanic.
It is remarkable, isn't it?
The name itself, just like screams grandeur and power.
Mm-hmm.
But where did that name even come from?
Well, it's rooted in mythology, actually. The Titans in Greek mythology were these primordial gods, these symbols of strength and power.
Yeah.
They ruled even before the Olympian gods. So naming these ships, Olympic, Britannic, and Titanic after them, it wasn't random.
Yeah.
It's totally intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Meant to convey their size and their ambition,
So they weren't just building ships, they were creating legends.
Ex-
And they really went all out to live up to that name. I mean, the Titanic was designed to be like a floating palace.
Oh, yeah.
They had opulent dining rooms modeled after the Ritz grand staircases, swimming pools, a gymnasium even.
It was over the top.
It was. And the level of luxury was just insane. Imagine scrolling down a promenade deck longer than a football field or having tea in a Parisian-style cafe.
Wow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
For those first-class passengers, it was pure indulgence.
It must have felt like a dream.
Totally. But it wasn't just about fancy decorations and stuff. The
No.
technology was mind-blowing, too. I mean, this thing was massive. Over 882 feet long, weighed more than 46,000 tons.
That's heavier than 10,000 elephants.
It's crazy, right?
Wow.
He had a double-bottom, 15 watertight compartments.
They thought it was practically unsinkable.
He did. It was like a symbol of how much they believed in technological progress. Like humans could conquer anything, even nature.
Of course, we know how that turned out.
Yeah, sadly. But the construction itself was incredible. It took over 3,000 men, 2 years of hard labor, millions of rivets to build this thing.
I can't even imagine the scale of that project.
It was a huge undertaking for sure. So behind this whole thing, you had a crew of almost 900 men,
Wow.
all from different backgrounds, with all these different skills working together to make it happen.
Like a well-oiled machine.
And then you had the passengers, over 2,200 of them, setting sail on this maiden voyage.
Who are these people?
That's a great question. The passenger list was like a snapshot of society back then.
Oh, really?
You had some of the wealthiest people in the world, industrialists, financiers,
Big
socialites.
names.
Yeah, like John Jacob Astor V, Benjamin Guggenheim. And then you had immigrants looking for a new life in America.
A real mix of humanity.
Totally. It's wild to think about those interactions. The first-class passengers with their champagne and caviar.
Right.
While those in third class, many of them escaping poverty, were hoping for a better future.
It's a powerful contrast.
It is. It reminds me of the Gilded Age, with all that opulence and also all that disparity.
A lot of contradictions.
Definitely. And the maiden voyage was a media frenzy.
Oh.
Newspapers all over the world were covering every little detail. People were obsessed with this symbol of progress.
The Titanic was more than just a ship. It was like a cultural phenomenon.
It really was. It captured that spirit of the time, that feeling that humans could do anything.
The optimism was palpable.
Totally. And so on April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set sail from Southampton, England, headed for New York City, the land of opportunity.
The journey begins.
They stopped in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, picked up some more passengers, and then headed out into the vast Atlantic.
It must have been exciting for everyone on board.
I bet. Waving goodbye to loved ones, some starting new lives, others heading home.
They had no idea what was coming.
They didn't. A journey full of dreams and hopes about to collide with the harsh reality of nature.
It's a poignant reminder, isn't it?
It is. Even the grandest human creations can be humbled by forces we can't control.
It makes you think about the fragility of life.
It does. It really does. It's just hard to believe that a ship that everyone thought was unsinkable could end up like that.
I know, it's a real tragedy.
What went wrong? How could something so advanced just, be defeated by nature?
Well, the investigations after the sinking, they show that it was like a whole bunch of things that happened, misjudgments, bad decisions, and maybe even a little too much confidence. It wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances.
So, walk me through it. What happened on that night, April 14th, 1912?
Okay, so picture this. The Titanic all lit up, cutting through these dark, icy waters in the North Atlantic.
Okay.
Now, they were going pretty fast for the conditions, even though they had gotten warnings about icebergs.
They knew about the icebergs.
Yeah, but not all of those warnings actually made it to the bridge. And the ones that did well, let's just say they weren't taken as seriously as they probably should have been.
It's kind of scary to think about that.
Yeah.
They knew about the risk, but kept going full speed ahead.
Exactly. And then around 11:40 p.m., it happened.
What happened?
The Titanic hit an iceberg.
Oh, no.
Right on its starboard side.
Was it like a huge crash?
Not really. It was more like a scraping sound. But that was enough to pierce the hull, and water started flooding into some of those watertight compartments.
But I thought the ship was designed to handle damage to multiple compartments. Wasn't that the whole point of the design?
It was. But the way the iceberg hit the ship, it caused flooding in more compartments than they had planned for.
So it was like a design flaw?
In a way, yeah. It was a vulnerability they just hadn't considered, and it ended up being a fatal mistake.
Wow. So the unsinkable ship was actually sinkable.
Yeah.
What happened when everyone realized how bad it was?
It was chaos. People were confused and scared. The situation wasn't clear to everyone right away, and to make matters worse, there weren't enough lifeboats for all the passengers and crew. And the evacuation was a mess. Many of the lifeboats were launched without being full.
That's heartbreaking, to think that there wasn't enough room for everyone.
It is. And as the Titanic started sinking, those who were left had an impossible choice: stay on board or jump into the freezing Atlantic. The water was below freezing, and a lot of people died from hypothermia within minutes.
It's just awful to imagine the panic and the desperation.
It was a horrific tragedy. More than 1,500 people lost their lives.
That's just unimaginable. And I read that most of the survivors were women and children, mostly from first and second class.
That's right. Which, again, really highlights the social inequalities of the time.
It's just sad that even in a disaster like that, your social class could determine whether you lived or died.
It's a sobering thought. And what about Bruce Ismay, the guy who ran White Star Line?
Yeah, what happened to him?
Well, he survived, but his reputation was ruined. He was accused of being a coward because he got on a lifeboat while so many others were left behind.
I can see why people were angry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine being in that situation knowing that some people were able to escape while others had no chance.
It's just not right.
But
The whole tragedy did have a huge impact on the world, right?
oh, definitely. It exposed all these problems with maritime safety regulations and led to a lot of changes. Well, they started requiring enough lifeboats for everyone on board, and they created international ice patrol systems.
So some good did come out of it.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a huge disaster to force people to make things safer.
It's a sad truth. This deep dive has been really eye-opening.
I agree. It's been fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time.
We've gone from those shipyards in Belfast to the luxury of the Titanic to the icy reality of the Atlantic. It's made me think about so much ambition, social responsibility, our place in nature.
It's a story that stays with you. It reminds us that even with all our technology, we're still vulnerable.
So true. What are your final thoughts as we wrap up our look at the Titanic?
For me, the Titanic shows that history is more than just dates and events. It's about people, their dreams, their struggles, and it reminds us to be humble because nature is always more powerful than we think.
I think that's a perfect way to end this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this has made you curious to learn more about the past and to think about the lessons we can take from it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.